Welcome to the midweek Bible study from the First Christian Church in Galax, Virginia. I'm Glenn Sage, interim pastor, and today we're still looking at the book of Ecclesiastes, which is one of the great wisdom writings of the Bible, found in the New Testament following the writings of David. And this is basically writings that was directed to a man's son, Solomon, who was king of Israel. And in it is a lot of wisdom and also a lot of his own prejudice. We are going to find the real search that Solomon is doing in this particular chapter near the end of the chapter. This is like so many conversations. Sometimes people will come and talk to you, and they really don't get to the essence of the matter until very close to the end. They sort of beat around the bush, and before they leave, they'll tell you what their real concern is after they sort of have an opportunity to fill you out, saying certain things or watching your facial expression to see what your reaction might be to it. So this seems to be the approach that Solomon has, and before we conclude our Bible study today, we're going to be getting into that final essence of the conversation from Solomon. So let's bow for a word of prayer. God our Father, we thank you for your eternal presence in our lives. We're thankful for your unending concern and love for us. We're grateful that you have made us a little lower than the angels, but yet you promised that the day would come when we would judge angels. So help us that we might appreciate our estate in the world, that we might recognize our value to you and to one another. So bless us as we impart your word and our understanding of it this hour. So be with us throughout the Bible study and may it impact our lives for good. We ask all of these things in the name of Jesus our Lord. Amen. Okay, we're going to start with the 11th verse of the 7th chapter of Ecclesiastes. We covered the first 10 verses last Wednesday. So Solomon here is talking about wisdom, and he's also talking about money. And these were two things that Solomon had, plus the addition of power and respect. So he's talking about the blessings that he has, but yet in the midst of being blessed beyond measure, beyond perhaps anyone else in Israel, he still seems to have discontent in his life. And we're going to see the source of this discontent as we continue to look at the verses that are before us. So beginning with verse 11, Solomon tells us something that we all should know, and that is wisdom is a good thing with an inheritance, and by it there is profit to them that see the sun. So he's talking about those who are on this side of eternity, where we're still able to rise up in the morning and see the sun. And we need to recognize that wisdom is vitally important. And also, if you are wise, to be blessed with money is a double blessing. And so wisdom gives you the ability to rightly use this and to use your wisdom to gain increase. And then in verse 12 it says, for wisdom is a defense and money is a defense. So there is a defense in both of these. There is a defense from poverty by having money and also by having wisdom. There is a defense where you can counter certain bad occasions that happen in your life. For example, in biblical times, there was no insurance except your neighbor and your family. For example, if your house was destroyed for some reason, you didn't call your insurance agent to have an adjuster come out and reimburse you for this, you had to depend upon either your own substance that you had stockpiled someplace, or the goodness of a relative or a neighbor. And so he's saying that that wisdom is a defense, really, that's beyond that of money. Money can increase or decrease in value based on a number of things, but friendship and wisdom and those that we can call friends are a vital thing in all of our lives. So he says the excellency of knowledge is that wisdom giveth life to them that have it. So we can be on this side of eternity, on this side of the sun, but yet we can live a life that's in misery. But Solomon is declaring that if we have wisdom, and if this wisdom is exercised, then we have a fullness of life. Wisdom can bring us a great sense of satisfaction and joy. So he tells us the limitations of what we know and what we understand. He says, consider the work of God, for who can make that straight which he hath made crooked? So he's saying there's certain things in life that we can't change, certain circumstances that we can't change. And he knew this well, coming from his own father. We know that when he first married Bathsheba, the thing that set in upon him was a sense of judgment because of what he did to Nathan, the husband of Bathsheba. And because of this, he lost his first son. And so when his first son was born, he began to engage in prayer and fasting because it looked like that things was going bad for the boy. And he prayed to God that he would restore his health and allow him to live. And of course, he knew that the kid was in this state because of his own sin. So the Bible tells us the sin continues to the second and even the third generation. So sometimes what we do that is wrong has consequences to our offspring and to those that follow us. And so here he's saying if God makes a pathway crooked, we can't make it straight. So David fasted for days. He wept. He prayed prostrate, laying out on the floor with his face to the floor, and agonized with God to save his son. And of course, this did not happen. His son died, and so he was not able to make that crooked path straight. So it doesn't make any difference how much money we have or how much influence or power that we might have. When health fails, either us or a member of our family, we can't always make it good, irrespective of how much money we have or what kind of power or influence that we might have. So there's some things that we just can't change. So in verse 14, he tells us, in the day of prophecy, be joyful, but in the day of adversity, consider. God also hath set thee one over against the other, to the end that man should find nothing after him. So David is talking about two experiences, a day of prosperity, and our feeling about this should be one of joy. You know, some people have what's called free-floating anxiety. If things are going good in their lives, they feel like, well, I'm going to have to pay for this some way. There's some kind of doom awaiting me around the corner. So even in good times, they don't capitalize on that, but they are looking for the other shoe to drop constantly. So here, Solomon is talking about that God has set one thing over the other. The sun shines and the rain falls both on the just and the unjust. And that's just a circumstance of life. In verse 15, he tells us that all things have I seen in the days of my vanity. There is a just man that perisheth in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man that prospereth, that prolongeth his life in his wickedness. So Solomon is struggling with, why does a good person die early in life and an evil person live a long life? We don't know the answer to that. Some people really struggle, for example, if they lose a small child. You know, how in the world could God allow this to happen to a small child, a small innocent child? But circumstances of life weighs out calamity both on the good and the evil, and certain things can happen to us irrespective of our position in life or anything else. And so as this occurs, we don't always have an answer as to the why that things happen. But we know that everything works for good for those that love him, meaning the Lord, those that are called according to his purpose. And we can't understand it. And sometimes people don't understand things that happen in their whole lifetime. But like the old song that we sing, we'll understand it all by and by. So perfect understanding is something that we have no command of here in this life. The very wisest of people certainly are able to cobble together much better understanding than someone who lacks wisdom. But irrespective of that, there are things that are beyond the wisest and the brightest of people. In verse 15, he tells us, all things have I seen in the days of my vanity. There's a just man who perisheth in his righteousness, and there's a wicked man that prolongeth his life in his wickedness. And then an instruction goes with this. He says, be not righteous over much, neither make thyself overwise. Why shouldest thou destroy thyself? And so he is basically saying, when much is given, much is required. So if you have wisdom and you get all kinds of promotions and you seem to be prospering in everything, along with that comes responsibility. And the depths of failure has a much greater impact than if you did not have that responsibility. In verse 17, he tells us, be not much wicked, neither be thou foolish. Why shouldest thou die before thy time? And so he's telling us that living a wicked lifestyle can bring about an early death. And we know that God's commandments as far as our behavior is intended to preserve our health and give us a good degree of health. And so a person who wants to pursue evil and wants to go in a different direction than what the Scriptures teaches us, then quite often there is a penalty, health-wise and otherwise, in life. You know, if you destroy your health in the early days of your life, quite often you have to live with the handicaps that's created by that for the rest of your days. In verse 19, he tells us that wisdom strengtheneth the wise more than 10 mighty men which are in the city. So if you are in need of defense, you would think the more people that you have, the better off that you're going to be as far as defending the city. So if you had 10 mighty men, you'd be grateful for the fact that they were there to help defend you and the city. But if you had one wise man, he perhaps could allow that small amount of men to do more than 10 strong men. This is so true with the account of the battle at the pass of Thermopylae, which is near the Dardanelles in Greece. And an invading army under Xerxes swept across Asia, and as he swept across Asia, he gathered together an army of 1.5 million men, the greatest amount of men at that point that had ever been engaged in a single battle. So he had 1.5 million men at his command, and he got across the Dardanelles there, the separation between Asia and Europe, and he was marching toward the city-state of Athens. And Sparta, 300 mighty men came up from Sparta, and they picked the spot that they were going to defend. And so in the defense of anything, to pick the high ground or to choose the ideal place to defend puts you in a much stronger position. And these 300 mighty Spartans warded off an army of 1.5 million men to give the time for the rest of Greece to gather together their army and defend against Xerxes. And it wasn't until somebody had divulged to the Assyrian army under Xerxes that there was a secret passage that would lead them over to the backside of this pass where the Grecian soldiers were defending. And that was the only way that they were able to finally overcome these 300 mighty Spartans. So 300 men in this situation, by picking the battleground, had a great advantage over 1.5 million people. So Solomon says that wisdom can be greater than having 10 mighty men. And that's been proven out in human history. In verse 19, it says that wisdom strengtheneth the wise more than 10 mighty men. And in verse 20, it says, but there is not a just man upon the earth that doeth good and sinneth not. Now, if we stop before that last phrase, and sinneth not, that would not really be a truth. You know, there's a lot of good people in the world. But here, he's talking about a perfect man, somebody who doesn't sin. And the scripture tells us that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And this is why we need Jesus, because we can't redeem ourselves. We are all in a fallen state to sin. And there has to be one who can take away our sins. And that is none other than Jesus Christ, our Lord. And so Solomon is saying 1,000 years before the New Testament declared that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Solomon is saying, the other people that may do good, but there's none that sinneth not. It says, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Then as we look at verse 21, it says also, take no heed unto the words that are spoken, lest thou hear thy servant curseth thee. So, if you take seriously every idle word that's said about you, you may be pretty discouraged. But he's telling us why that it's important that we not consider everything that might be said. In verse 22, it says, for oftentimes thine own heart knoweth that thou thyself likewise hath cursed others. So as you have talked badly about other people, there are people who have talked badly about you. So he is saying that don't take heed to this. Don't let this get you down. Some people's lives are governed simply by what others say of them. And in today's world, social media has been very destructive to the self-esteem and feelings that young kids have had about themselves. Somebody just posts some nasty remark about them on the internet, and all their friends have read this, and it just puts them in a state of dismay. Sometimes kids, teenagers and so forth, have actually killed themselves because of postings on the internet about them. So we live in a world that can be very cruel, and people sometimes give little regard to what we might have to say about others and how this might affect them. Verse 23, it says, all this have I proven by wisdom. I said, I will be wise, but it was far from me. So here he was given the gift of being the wisest man that ever lived in Jerusalem or ever would. But when he assesses himself, he says, wise. He was a seeker of wisdom. He went to great extent to learn of things. For example, he would lay down, put his nose to the ground, and he'd watch the ant. And there's a lot to discover about watching an ant. One of the things that we discover is they can carry about 6 times their weight. So they're very, very strong for their size. And discover is, for example, if there's a crumb of bread there on the ground, and 2 ants reach that crumb of bread, and one of them grabs a hold of one side and the other side, and they begin to pull. And one will overpower the other for a second or two, and then the seesaw battle continues. And the bread's not moving anywhere. Neither one is gaining anything, and they're just wearing themselves out because they won't concede to be cooperative with each other. If they join together, they could take that crumb right back to their aim hole, and everybody in that little colony could profit from eating on that crumb of bread that they've carried back. But instead, they're constantly at war with each other. So what do we gain about warring one with the other rather than learning to cooperate and care for one another? Solomon goes on to say that in verse 24, he says, that which is far off and exceedingly deep, who can find it out? So things sometimes require a close examination. We can look at something at a great distance, and it looks far different than what it really is. For example, we can go down off of this plateau where we live up here in Carroll County, Virginia, and get out 15, 20 miles away and turn and look back, and the mountain looks blue. And hence the name for this mountain range here, which is the Blue Ridge Mountains. It looks blue at a distance because of the moisture and everything in the atmosphere. But when we get close, we discover that it's in the spring and summer, it's green and full of color. In the wintertime, it turns the color of that has lost its leaves and so forth. So some things to understand it, we must be close at hand. And as I think about the Christian faith, some people have rejected it and never tried it. Try God and see how wondrous your life can be. How the peace that passes all understanding can be an experience of your life. And so they have rejected him thumbs down, and so they have not come close and examined him to see who he really is. And like I preached Sunday, Jesus declared, come unto me, all ye that labor and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. People haven't tried the burden of God. They sit at their homes. They don't seek him out. They don't try to learn of him. But Solomon was a seeker of wisdom. And sometimes wisdom confounded him. Wasn't able to reach the conclusions that he sought. But in the final analysis, when we finish up with Solomon's writings, we see that he did come to the right conclusion. But his journey was a difficult one. it brought about a lot of stress in his life. In verse 25, he says, "And I applied my heart to know and to search and to seek out wisdom and the reason of things, and to know the wickedness of folly, even of foolishness and madness." And so Solomon tried to look at both sides of the question. Maybe what I ought to do is just spend my whole life trying to have fun and everything, irrespective of how it might affect other people and myself. And perhaps he did that for a certain period of time. But as he did this, he certainly did not achieve the purpose that he sought, and so he turned to doing good, and he found fulfillment and joy in this. And here, from verse 26 through 29, he gets to the real crux of the whole matter about why happiness and joy had evaded him as he struggled between wisdom and goodness and evil and so forth. And it's over one thing. He says, "And I find more bitter than death the woman whose heart is snares and nets, and her hand as bands. Whoso pleaseth God shall escape from her, but the sinner shall be taken by her." So Solomon's experience with women was one that he saw them as a trap, as a way of destroying him. And he cast them all in the same lot. Now, Solomon had a lot of experience with women because he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. And out of all of that assortment of women, he felt like that he was taken advantage of. And we'll see this as we continue to look at these verses. He says, "Behold, this have I found, saith the preacher, counting one by one to find out the account, which yet my soul seeketh, but I find not. One man among 1,000 have I found." So he's saying you can't trust all men either. The majority of them will disappoint you. The majority of them will let you down. You might find one out of 1,000 that's good. So Solomon was hard to please. Men had constantly disappointed him, but every now and then he found a golden kernel in a lot, one out of 1,000. And so he goes on, he says, "Yet my soul seeketh, but I find not one man among 1,000, but a woman have I not found." So he had close relationships with 1,000 women, and he didn't find a one that you could trust. So that says a lot to me about his sense of judgment and perhaps where he was looking, and also his own attitude. You know, if you look for the worst in people, you can find it. It's there. You can find that we all are short of perfection. If you're looking for goodness in people, you can find that also. So in the last verse of this chapter, which we're concluding with today, he says, "Lo, this only have I found, that God hath made man upright, but they have sought out many inventions." So even though, man walks on 2 legs, he's upright. Most of the animals walk on 4 legs or crawl on their stomachs or whatever. But God has made man to walk upright, not only by his posture, but also by his deeds. And so in spite of the fact of all the good things that he has, he looks for inventions. He looks for more than what he has. And that's called ambition. It may be considered bad by some, but it certainly made all of our lives better because the inventions of yesteryear continue to have application in our lives. Early man basically had 7 simple tools. There was the inclined plane, which also served as a wedge, and there was the pulley, which you could go a long way and pull a weight upward a short distance, and you put just a fraction of the effort in it. And there was so many inventions, simple inventions that compounded together have made machines. And so life is better because of the inventions. But man is never satisfied, and man should not be, and especially Christians, should not be satisfied with their spiritual estate. We need to grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. So God bless each and every one of you. Until next Wednesday, we also, on this same channel, we have our morning worship service recorded, and it can be found at the same location on the internet. So God bless you, and thank you for joining us today.